Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and episode 76 is right now. To those of you out here maybe listening to this pretty soon after it's released, Merry Christmas. Yesterday was Christmas here in Ohio. I'm at home visiting family on break from school, and yeah, another Christmas come and gone, and I got to spend some good time with family. And now we kind of turn and face the new year. So with that, today's episode is called The Third Way. And the chapters of my book so far have been kind of like dichotomies between different different subjects, and I think this is really the first one where I'm encouraging to step outside the box. And what I mean is, dualistic thinking or dichotomies or whatever you want to call it. You often have two different choices, sometimes morally or otherwise. One's kind of clearly more right, one's clearly more wrong, and sometimes it's not that simple. And especially when you have two choices that could easily be right for you, it's really hard to make a decision. And I find, whether it's you or someone you love and you're involved somehow, the third way is what I would simply say as delaying. Delaying till more information is given and a decision can, more readily be made. Delaying until the person grows to a point where the decision becomes apparent. And it's really difficult because all we really have in our lives is our life and our time on this earth. And so to inject your time into that equation is one of the most valuable things you can do for yourself or for a person. So big stakes, but also I think it's a really important thing to take responsibility of, because it is so important. You can use your time in ways where you kind of don't realize it's slipping by, and then I think at the end of your life, you'll wish you had that time back. That's when regret kind of pops in. And so my plan, whether I get things wrong or right, in the end, hindsight being 2020, I want to just be able to say that I lived. I did what I wanted to do, the thing I thought was as right as I could be in that moment, with the information I had at the time, and I went all in, and I don't think I'll ever regret that. So very excited today to kind of talk about ways that I've learned to do it. And it's funny, I was researching for this episode and I found secular Buddhism, which is, I guess, a less spiritual version of Buddhism, taking the principles and really removing kind of the Buddha out of it, I guess. Not wanting to be a part of Buddhism, but still adhering to its principles, I guess, which is cool. Use it however you can. And I was reading about it, and it was talking about the third way being a way to balance engagement and detachment. So someone I listen to a lot, Sadhguru, he talks about being happy, and the way you're able to be happy is being totally involved with what you're doing, engaging. But also sometimes happiness means detaching from things that are kind of holding us back. So you don't want to be fully engaged, you don't want to be fully detached. So the third way is a way of holding reality's pain without fighting it. a balanced middle ground. You don't want to be fight or flight all the time. You want to be able to do both. And I just thought, that's kind of how I operate. I came to that. I came to that goal. I'm not perfect at it, but I came to that goal kind of on my own through my studies of, Buddhism and other religions. I don't want to live in a monastery. I also don't want to get trapped in the trappings of the world, but I want to enjoy myself, enjoy what this world has to offer, while cultivating a monk-like, scene inside my body, which I think just, if I'm being honest, is really what this book is kind of about, is facing your desires, letting your body feel what it feels like to have them, to get rejected, to feel fear, to feel triumph, to, feel the full range of human emotions to the point where nothing's a surprise. You can go after your dreams and it's all familiar. I think just familiarity with yourself and how you're going to feel about things gives you more courage to keep going bigger, stronger, faster, longer, whatever. I saw another place, I thought was a very good description of it. So the transformative dance between attachment and detachment is sometimes called the third way. Some prefer to take on the world, to fight it, change it, fix it, rearrange it. Others deny there's a problem at all. It suits their needs as it is. Both instincts avoid holding the tension, the pain, and essentially tragic nature of human existence. And I think what I've observed from people is a lot of people try to stand in their power either by a full yes or a full no. And I think there's a way to stand in your power and be able to choose yes or no, depending on the situation, just being able to trust yourself to know when it should be yes and when it should be no. And I think by always saying yes or always saying no, I think you hurt your fellow humans. And what I mean is, in your attempt to control things and their attempt to control things, you wind up just trying to control each other instead of choosing yes or no in situations. And, although sometimes it may be a no, I mean, honestly, if anyone says no, it's a no. So 3 out of 4 times it's a no. But that time where it's yes, yes, that 1/4 of the time, that's the most amazing quarter. So to get that amazing quarter, you have to give up some security to find it. You have to be vulnerable. And I think being able to do that, hold this dark side of reality, it transforms you. I know it's transformed me when I've pushed myself to try to live this way. It could be a bit of a roller coaster, but when it transforms you, I feel like that's how you develop grace. You develop just access to life that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. And a lot of it is developing the vision, so to be able to see opportunities to say yes and no and choose, and to get that freedom, but also it's the will to just sit through it. I think that piece about sitting in that tension is tough. It's extremely tough. So I found also, this is from the Secular Buddhist Network, a guy named Robert Ellis. He wrote 5 Principles of the Middle Way back in 2023. You can look it up on the internet. But I love this. It eloquently puts things that I think and feel and agree with, so that I don't have to, because someone already did. It's great. So the 5 principles. First one is skepticism. And I think the way it's intended, what I understand here, even-handed skepticism, like this isn't skepticism as a based on our biases, which I think is really difficult. I think the first principle you have to have for this is that all humans are equal in that they do lie, they do tell the truth, they are amazing, they are evil, and they have the capacity to choose it at any time. And depending on their physiology at the moment and, how their life is going at the moment, all day you can catch someone at a bad or a good moment and get a completely different answer for something. So this level of skepticism has to be highly tuned to the moment and the situation, while treating someone as an equal to yourself and others, while also being highly skeptical of them. I always think of strong opinions loosely held. I'm going to kind of hold you to this higher standard, but if the facts all check out and the vibe is right, it could be true. And I think the key also that he mentions is it's not positive versus negative. There's no polarity in this. So in terms of approaching a situation, there's going to be things that you think are right and things that you think are wrong. But oftentimes we won't know until after the fact with the benefit of time. So you can't treat any of the positions as negative. You have to accept uncertainty and collect information and be ready to move forward. There's no, even when there's 2 choices, like I was saying earlier, the third way, I think, allows for time as well. So it brings me back to the Star Wars quote, only a Sith deals in absolutes. So you say you're with me or you're my enemy. There's got to be a way to kind of press pause as a third option. And there's always a choice, If one choice is looking pretty inevitable, there is a third choice that becomes kind of the second choice in a way. Like if one is looking like a 99% probability, I think that automatically brings in a third where that second one gets bumped. And oftentimes it's highly uncomfortable, but probably the right thing to do, to be honest. Hard to say without an example. But the second piece is provisionality. And this is what I was talking about. I said strong opinions loosely held. So providing for the ability to change our minds in light of new experience or information. So like I was saying, delaying, having that third choice of delaying and collecting more information, experiencing something, I think is super, super important. And you don't want to understand it as rationality. We have to realize that our old beliefs may have been wrong. Our old beliefs may have been right for a period of time, and then times change, and now you got to change. And sometimes, too, you got to realize that the old beliefs, sometimes the old ways are best, and they're just never going to get replaced. But you have to be willing to replace them. I think that comes from a willingness. And this is a metaphor at the end of this I love a lot too. So the Buddha's famous metaphor for provisionality is the raft. So if you have a raft that you built to get across a river, you cross the river. Once you get to the other side, unless you know you have to cross another river beyond that, you're going to leave the raft behind. And again, that's also, I think, an important distinction here is I saw a quote reminder or something the other day. I forget where I saw it, but it was like we use things, not people. So there's no people that aren't going to be a raft in that scenario. The raft is an inanimate object that you built. And although you spent time and it's valuable and it could be a really cool raft, you got to be okay leaving it behind. And you should never use people as a raft. If you know you're using someone, you should just cut them loose and let them be before taking too much. Third, incrementality. This is a little bit like time and waiting and pressing pause, but I also think it's important to mention if the example of like toothpaste coming out of the tube. It's really hard to put toothpaste back in to a toothpaste tube. Once you squeeze it out, you're going to use it or you're going to waste it. And honestly, if you're brushing your teeth, it doesn't take that much. You're not going to squeeze out half a tube and pretend like that's how much you need to brush your teeth one time. So, incrementality is the ability to move in what you think is the right direction, but maybe not just going to the deep end. And there's some times where I wholeheartedly believe that going to the deep end is necessary to elicit some type of outcome. Like if you want to know for sure, sometimes things just have to be tested right there in the moment, and there's no point putting it off. But there's other times where incrementality really makes sense. So if it's really low stakes, or the matter is of like the utmost importance, you have information that this thing is basically a lock. Don't let fear hold you back from just jumping in just to see something. Again, if the cost is low, or you're just 99% sure it's a win. And those don't come along very often, so incrementality is very, very important. I think that's how the human body works 99% of the time. Homeostasis, our bodies, how they change. We lose weight, we gain muscle. These things happen slowly. Chiropractic, for example, I'm not going to expect someone to get better after one appointment, but I am going to try to do that. If I give them that kind of care, then maybe they get better in 3 to 5 appointments versus 10, which is the best case scenario, because then hopefully I can get them as a patient for a long time. They enjoyed the care and it was good. So understanding that that's kind of how human nature is, and understanding also that miracles do happen, and sometimes things are just a lock and you got to send it. Again, it's funny, these principles, not being married to these principles either, So sometimes skepticism, provisionality, incrementality, like these things are important, but they also don't account for that off chance that you do just have a strange certainty to something. It's important to send it sometimes too. Fourth principle, agnosticism. So I think absolute beliefs, like I was just talking about, believing something is a lock, is a quick and easy way to divide people. So the whole point of this third way is to kind of walk the middle between two choices. Like for instance, Democrats and Republicans, I personally don't find myself attracted by either party. I, in the past, have voted for candidates based on their individual merit and kind of excluding, what party they work for. And it's a little bit uncomfortable because when I get around friends, most of them have an allegiance to one party or the other. And they just don't want to think about it. They want to join a party, and then the party does the thinking because they want to think about other things. And I think that's also a choice. But I'd rather have that healthy skepticism about everything and not just be a part of a group because I always have been. I want to, I think it's important when you have, say like a monthly subscription that you reassess and reevaluate every now and then, like, hey, I have HBO Max. Am I watching any shows on HBO Max? Like, I just finished ER personally, and now I'm watching a show on Amazon Prime. So do I need HBO Max right now? I don't know. There's a couple movies I want to see on there, so maybe I'll watch them and cancel. But not always, sometimes I just let it run. I have student discounts on everything, so it's like $5 for every streaming service. And, in the off chance that I want to watch some HBO, then I have it. And that's fine with me. But that's just an example of how agnosticism could be applied. Again, strong beliefs loosely held. You don't want to just join a group and submit to groupthink. You want to challenge everything, understand everything. The more you understand about life, the less likely it is that you'll be taken advantage of. These groups need people. So when you're not a member of the group, they're going to want you to be one. So you can always get the benefits of, adding your flame to the fire, so to speak, when the time comes. If you need to do that for a specific candidate or any other situation in life, you can put your full support behind it and it will be appreciated. But again, that's not a guarantee. It shouldn't be a guarantee of future help. You should reevaluate every so often and really understand if something's still for you. I think it's a little bit challenging for people because being put up for review is nerve-wracking. But I think if you go about your life trying to do your best at everything you do, I think you'll be fine. If something doesn't, say it's like a performance review at work, it doesn't go well, maybe you need a new job. Maybe you need to find something else to do. And all of your skills and the way you've developed yourself will allow you to get one easily. If you're doing all the right things, then it shouldn't be a problem. Not to say that there will never be problems, because there will be. And last but not least, integration. Part of the third way also is realizing that although we have these choices in life, A versus B, you should work over the long term to reduce A versus B conflict. Absolutism, choices, it's kind of inevitable. And that basically means you should do everything you can to avoid it, even though you can't. But you just don't want that pile to get so big that it becomes more of a problem, because it's always going to be a problem, but you could keep it to a manageable problem and spend your energy doing other stuff. I think the best way to talk about it is the Buddha, his image for integration, is a wet piece of wood that gradually takes in water. I think sorry, I'm reading what this thing says, and it's not really making sense. But I think what it's trying to say is ultimately, that's enough dead air. In a way, a little bit has to do with incrementalization, but it's talking about incremental change over a lifetime and understanding that, say, for example, like one battle is won or a decision is made and life moves on. Like another option is going to always kind of pop up. You know, like there's going to be a direction and there's always going to be an opposing force. But if you don't get married to one direction for a long time, you don't allow it to pick up momentum, you can keep the forces on either side pretty small. So being willing to change out forces and also being willing to update each force. You know, to go back to politics, is the Democrats used to be Republicans and vice versa. So I think Abraham Lincoln emancipated the slaves. He was a Republican. And nowadays, if you look at the way our society is set up and the way that kind of social issues are divided, we would expect Abraham Lincoln to be a Democrat by name. But the social principles of Democrats nowadays match more what Republican Abraham Lincoln was and what he did. So it just goes to show over time, like, different things happen in these political parties and the the attitudes shift and the names change doors, but what's behind the doors in the first place is typically the same. So if you don't allow either one to get sufficiently overwhelming, it's kind of like a race to the bottom, or in a way like being too big to fail. So like at a certain point, if the party becomes so important, or one party becomes so important, the other one will kind of rise to match it and get bigger and bigger and bigger. That elephant in the room gets bigger until it fills the entire room. The analogy of a race to the bottom is like, say like two businesses are competing on price. Well, if they keep lowering their prices, eventually, prices can't go any lower or else they're going to lose money. So, who's going to be like 1 cent cheaper, and how is that really going to be better for anyone? Instead, you should build value and market to customers in a way that they understand that they're paying for something valuable, they're getting something valuable in return. And, instead of trying to compete on price, you compete on being the best at what you do and raising the price. So, long story short, these energies in our world, our emotions and situations, they can become very strong. And so if you, build up a bunch of momentum and you let that thing go, it can kind of overpower the whole system. So integration being, you want to win, but not at the cost of the whole system, is essentially the way I think of it. And that was weird having to pause and kind of get that right in my head. But yeah, I don't know if you can tell, I've been thinking a lot about these things over the past couple of days, in and out of some Christmas fun. So yeah, maybe a little hangover from Christmas food. Anyways, like I said, those are 5 principles of the middle way, but really it boils down to three ways in life. 2 choices are going to be readily apparent. If neither of those choices are morally for you what you feel to be right, there's always a third choice. There's always abstention, extension, delay as much as you can, and even sometimes there's acceleration. And I think it all just depends on the situation that you're in, and the only way to figure out how to balance these forces is to go after your desires with everything you got. And that includes the accelerator, the brake, the steering wheel, and everything in between. Like all of your tools. You got to have all your tools in your tool belt and be ready to implement them to create a third path at any moment. So that is it for chapter 6 of the book. Pretty soon, here before New Year's, I will come in hot with chapter 7. And then, unfortunately for me, I got to get to writing this book. But anyways, thank you for listening. If you're still listening, this is a long episode with a big old minute-long dead air in there somewhere. So thanks for sticking with me if you did. Otherwise, until next time, I'll be seeing you guys.